And Dr. Lucas is with us in the studio, dodging the raindrops in here this morning. Good morning, Doctor. How are you?
I didn't dodge any.
You didn't dodge any. Yeah, they got them. You got hit by every one of them, right? All right. We've been talking about insulin the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, so we'll continue that for one more week.
So what is it that how are we going to approach this today?
So we're going to fill in the gaps that we talked about a couple of weeks ago about insulin. So we're trying to mimic the pancreas when we give insulin shots. Now, insulin shots are not the same as the pancreas because you have to put them under the skin, and the pancreas doesn't put it under the skin. The pancreas puts it right in the bloodstream.
Right.
So it works instantly when the pancreas does it. When you do it, there's a delay in the reaction. So the pancreas makes a little insulin all the time, and that's to keep the liver from releasing sugar. The liver stores sugar for when you don't eat. So insulin is made to try to keep the liver storing it until you do need it.
Where is your pancreas anyway? I couldn't spot that if I
So it's behind your stomach. Most people think their stomach is lower than it really is, but it's up there, where your rib cage is. It's like right, that little thing that dangles down from your sternum, your breastbone.
Right.
The stomach's behind there, so it's pretty far up, and then the pancreas is right behind it.
Okay.
Sort of towards the back.
So when you inject it under the skin, then it has to circulate through the body to get
It has to
there,
get
right?
absorbed. It goes into the fat. If you have fat, and then it gets absorbed in the bloodstream, and then it goes around the body, and then it goes to the liver. It makes the liver not release sugar, and then it goes to the cells and makes the cells get the sugar inside the cells.
So there's short acting and fast acting. We've been talking over the few years that we've been doing the show. You've been talking about some different changes in some of these.
Right. So the insulins are getting longer acting and shorter acting. So the long acting ones are the Lantus was the first one that was really long acting, like once a day. There was NPH before that, which was not once a day. It was part of the day, and it peaked at certain times. So when you're trying to do basal insulin, it's called basal, which means that it doesn't peak. It doesn't peak as the highest strength of it. So it doesn't peak at all. It just gives you the same insulin all day long, just like the pancreas would be doing. So if you didn't eat all day and you took your basal insulin, theoretically you shouldn't have any low blood sugars because it should keep your sugar even all day, and that's one way of figuring out if your dose is right. So usually you start off with 10 or 20 units, usually at night, or you can take it in the morning. It doesn't really matter. Just take it about the same time every day. And you start off with that dose, and then the way that you increase it or titrate it up depends on what your blood sugar is. If you're taking it at night, you use the morning blood sugar, and that's usually what you use for all basal insulins, is what the morning blood sugar is. So if you're trying to get the morning blood sugar down below like 120 or 100, sort of depending on what your doctor's told you, you can gradually increase the dose, usually 3 to 4 units every 3 or 4 days, to try to get it up to that point. But the trouble with that is, if you're only looking at the fasting blood sugar, then what about the other blood sugars the whole day? Because blood sugars are domino effects. So if you have a high blood sugar one part of the day, you don't want to treat another part of the day and forget about the high blood sugar. So if you have a high blood sugar at night because you've eaten a lot of food at night or watched TV and eat constantly while you're watching TV, then your sugar's going to be high when you go to bed. So a lot of people don't check it then because it's scary to check it then. It's like so high. So what you do is you just go by the fasting, and the fasting looks good because it's come down overnight. But if you're using insulin and you're trying to get the insulin dose right, you don't want to just check it once a day. You want to check it other times of the day too. So you really want to check it before you go to bed and see how good that is. And if that's really high, say that's 300, and it comes down to 200, well, you don't want to go up with your basal insulin for the 200. You want to work on the 300 first. So you always want to work on the highest one. So basal insulin, titrating it up also depends on when it's the highest. And if it's always high after supper or after you've eaten, then the basal insulin is not the way to go necessarily for you. Or it's not. It may be helpful throughout the whole day in lowering everything a little bit, but it may not be. You may not only want to look at the fasting blood sugar.
So if you're taking a basal, long-lasting insulin, then I would imagine that a lot of people do think that you don't have to take your blood sugar as often because it's supposed to even out.
Right, or they think they can eat more. And basal insulin does not cover meals. So if you eat a whole bunch of food, the basal insulin gradually may bring it down overnight if you take enough of it, but that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to keep the liver from making sugar at night, is to help the morning sugar start off good. But if you've already ruined the morning by eating a lot at night, then it's only going to lower it so much. So say you take 20 units at night, it lowers it 200 points, that's pretty good, but maybe you need to work on that one that's 300 and not on the one in the morning that's 100. So that's where the pre-meal insulin comes in.
The short acting.
The short acting. And it's getting shorter and shorter. The regular insulin was the first, and that was the one that they developed first anyway. The basal insulins were not developed until the 1950s. So the 1920s, you just had short acting. And you had to take short acting every so often because it wore off, because it's short. So it may last 4 to 6 hours, and that's it. So you'd have to take it 4 times a day. And some people feel like everybody's blood sugar was better controlled with just short acting, because we didn't get into this false sense of security of the long acting.
But you had to take it.
You had to take it when you ate so that you could store the food from your meal. So short acting is given before the meal. In the past, it had to be given pretty far in advance, like 30 to 45 minutes before you ate, so it would start working by the time you ate. Well, no one ever did that. So when they came out with the more rapid insulins, the Novolog and Humalog, later, everyone was already giving the R right before, and it only peaked like 2 hours later, and the sugar was already really high, and then it brought it down. So the shorter acting did a little bit better. It's still not perfect. It still has to get absorbed. So what they're doing now is trying to make the insulin shorter acting, either by changing the molecule of insulin so it's smaller molecule gets absorbed quicker, or putting an additive in the insulin to make it absorb faster. And sometimes the additives, it's hard to explain what they are, but one definitely dilates blood vessels around the injection site, so it gets in the blood faster, and that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So short acting though, because you could look at it 2 different ways. So short acting means it doesn't last very long, or does it takes effect more quickly?
Yeah, it's more rapid acting and it's shorter.
So it's
it doesn't
both.
live as long, so it might be 4 to 6 hours. Basal insulin might be 24 to 43 hours. So you give one shot, it lasts a really long time, and that's good if you don't eat much, you know. But if you eat and you need insulin, you're going to need to give your short acting before a meal based on sort of what's happened in the past, the higher sugar, you'd like to get it down before you eat, and what you're going to eat. So that's why you start counting what you're eating and figuring out what your dose is. So that's carb counting. It's a little more complicated. It's not as complicated as it sounds, but every exchange, so fruit exchange, milk exchange, bread exchange, like the old Weight Watchers exchanges, is 15 grams of carbs. So it's an estimate. It's not a perfect. People that are engineers don't like it, but that's just the way it is. It's just like, it's just an estimate.
Do you use both?
What?
Short and long acting?
Yes. You almost always have to do that. Now, if you're on other medicines, such as Victoza or Byetta, that cover your meals, and you still make insulin, you may not need the pre-meal insulin. So a lot of these GLP-1 drugs have sort of taken that role because they're helping the pancreas make insulin at the right time. And if your pancreas still makes enough insulin, or you don't eat many carbs, you don't need the pre-meal insulin if you're type 2. But type 1s always need the pre-meal, the basal, and the bolus. It's called a bolus because you give a bunch of insulin at one time and it works quicker. So you base it on how many carbs you're eating, how many fruits, milks, and starches you eat, and usually target 1 unit for 15 grams or 2 units for 15 grams of carbs, and you add it up. You just count what you're eating on your plate, and that's how much insulin you give. So it's really not that hard. People freak out about it. But either
I didn't know there would be math.
1, 2, 3. It's just counting. It's not math. But anyway, 1, 2, 3. So the other way of doing it is to eat the same number of grams of carbs with that meal and take that much insulin every time, which is the same thing really. But some people take 5 units every meal. Well, okay, what if you go on a diet and you don't eat any carbs? The 5 units is too much. Or say you eat pasta or pizza, that's going to be too little. So you sort of try to estimate it based on your meal, and you can figure out if that's the right dose because you just check it after the meal and see if it's staying pretty even.
Okay, all right. We're talking more about diabetes and insulin intake in just a moment with Sugar Talk with Dr. K. Jean Lucas.